Hi. Today, we are gathered to talk about one of my absolute favorite stories in the Bible, Lazarus, one with which I'm sure you're familiar, but I hope, as is almost always the case, even for somebody who went to seminary or people who've been a part of the church for their entire lives, when you revisit these things, it feels like there's always something surprising. Is that in there? Or I could have sworn that was in there. It's not? It happens all the time. So as we go through this familiar story, I hope there's something strange and exciting and newly comforting, something about it that works that way for you. Let's just pray together really quick, and that'll also give me time to cool down, and then we'll proceed. God, we give you thanks for the stories of your great faithfulness you have passed down from generation to generation, and we give you thanks for the people you continue to gather in every generation in so many places around the world who want to hear your stories and want to have their faith strengthened through that hearing. In your Son Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, let's start, as one of my favorite professors from Princeton Seminary always had us start, by simply reading it. He said, when in doubt, read it out. He was sort of an interesting guy. A lot of grad school seminars prioritize bulk and volume. You look at the syllabus and it's a terrifying list of readings, books, articles, everything. It's overwhelming. You'd open his syllabus and you'd oftentimes see only one or maybe two books. And that's what you'd read for the whole semester. And instead of reading 400 pages in a week for his class, you'd read 10 pages of a book, and you'd read it very closely. When in doubt, read it out. That's what he'd always say. So this is the story of Lazarus from the Gospel of John. Before we read any of these verses, though, I just want to give you a sense for this story, like a visual sense for this story, okay? Watch closely. This is slide number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the Lazarus story in John's Gospel. And I have selectively edited. If you look closely at the verse numbers, I've taken some things out, some stage directions and things like that. This is the story. So usually what we like to do is read these things and savor them and chew on them, and we'll go back and ask what you noticed, what you missed. I'm actually just going to read it through as quickly as possible. I know in this latest chapter in Mount Olivet's storied history, you've all grown a little more accustomed to readings in Sunday morning worship that are a little longer. So you've been training your muscles for such a time as this. But even so, this is a little excessive, but we'll do the best we can. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus, more on them later. Lord, he whom you loves is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God... Okay, we're skipping ahead. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. Okay, we're skipping ahead. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Thank you, Trevor. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world. When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and said, come on, Mary, skipping ahead. Now Jesus had not yet come. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was, she knelt at his feet and said, Mary knelt at Jesus' feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, where have you laid him? And they said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." You see how much I skipped? It's a long story. That's the first thing I want you to think about and to register when we dive back into Lazarus. They dedicated a lot of space to this in the Gospel of John. And here's the thing, sometimes people don't like to think about this. These passages, these books, the Bible in all its many parts, was not photocopied. It wasn't digitally transferred from file to file. There wasn't a microfiche stored in a tomb somewhere. I guess the Dead Sea Scrolls are the closest thing we have to that. It was copied and recopied by scribes. And as much as we don't like to think about it, those scribes either made mistakes or they made decisions from time to time, which means more times than we can count, in more languages than we are equipped to read, scribes continually chose to transcribe this story in full length. It's the longest narrative in any of the Gospels outside of the Passion narrative, the story of Jesus Christ's way to the cross, his death, Easter, and all that. This is a very important story going on that detail alone. All right, before we go into some of my sort of my storytelling, my arc through it, I want to think with you a little bit about what did you get from this story. I have some notes, some things that I think are interesting, but just what did you hear? We're going to shout it out a little bit. Just 2 or 3 things. What did you hear in this story that was interesting to you, surprising to you, a character that feels worth revisiting, anything like that? What did you get from the story?
So Jesus hesitated rather than going right away when they told him.
Yeah, Jesus hears the one you love is sick. He hangs out for 2 more days, and then he goes. That's interesting. Jesus wept. Famously, the shortest verse in Scripture. Poignant. It's a poignant detail. I have a bone to pick right now. The Bible, the version of the Bible that we use for worship purposes here at Mount Olivet is the NRSV, the New Revised Standard Version. That has come out with an updated edition, so we don't have it in the pews yet, but it's the unwieldy NRSVUE is the new sort of standard for churches like ours. And one of the changes that was made, and why did they do this? But they're grammar scholars, they're ancient Greek scholars, they're Koine Greek scholars. They read poems in the language, they read extra biblical literature, they know what these words mean in a bigger context. They changed Jesus wept to Jesus began to weep. That is so, get the marbles out. Like, that is so inelegant. There was something so nice about the precision of that. Jesus wept. Jesus has a heart indeed. Jesus is not some Teflon God immune to the petty sufferings of these fragile mortal creatures fashioned from clay. Jesus was greatly moved and disturbed in his spirit. Jesus wept. What else did you guys notice as we blitzed through this epic story? It's never too late, right? Jesus wants to assure them. One of the most common admonitions in Scripture from angelic messengers, from Jesus, do not be afraid. And its close partner here in this story, it's never too late for God. It's never too late for Jesus. Okay, here's some fun details I want you to think about. How long do you remember? And if you're the 6th grade group, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the new program we have here, 6th grade starter. It's phenomenal. I'll talk to any of you about it afterwards. I think it's the best thing we're doing. These kids are learning the Bible so well. I would have a bag of candy here, and as I asked you these questions, I would throw them out. How long, did you notice, how long was Lazarus in the tomb?
4 days.
Hold it up, like the Gophers on 4th down, right? 4 days. One more than Jesus, right? Maybe that's a storytelling trick there. This guy was well and truly dead, deader than Jesus just before Easter morning. Well and truly dead. I love, and I might have skipped over this part, but if we go back to verse 11, sorry, I'm going to look here. The language Jesus uses. Okay, here we go. The language Jesus uses. He's talking to disciples. He's been told that his dear friend, the one whom he loves, is sick on the brink of death. Jesus told them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him. The disciples don't understand this. They say, if he's sleeping, let him sleep. What are we going to, there's no cars, there's no bus. What are we going to schlep ourselves all the way there? Let him sleep. Jesus, of course, knows that he's dead. But this is how Jesus describes it. Because for Jesus, death is not what it once was in the natural world. Lazarus has fallen asleep. I love that. I find that image enormously comforting. We do invoke it from time to time in our worship life here, in our funeral services here, at the service of remembrance, and perhaps you've heard it in the context of so-and-so has fallen asleep in the arms of her Lord and Savior. What a lovely way to think, and that was given to us straight from Jesus. We went fast, we talked about the sisters, we did drop a name here or there, but Mary and Martha, the famous Mary and Martha, are back in this story. And we're not going to do it much here because our time is limited. And again, you saw how long this story was. And we're going to mostly focus on Jesus and Lazarus. But as you go off, some of you are in Living the Message groups that meet on the weeks. You can have a little more time to read this carefully and talk about it at length with your group. I think it would be really interesting and really fruitful for you to focus on Mary and Martha in this story. Because nobody gets a worse rap of the women in the New Testament than Martha, right? Get your priorities straight, Martha. Like bustling around, working all the time, ignoring Jesus right in your own house. Like, just like you're missing the forest for the trees, right? Well, here they are again, and I wonder if we think more kindly of Martha in this story. She's the one who responds to Jesus. I know you're the Messiah. She's the one who goes out first and meets him on the edge of town when Mary is back at the house. It's just nice to see. We don't often get to see side characters like a cameo come back. So it's fun when we get another glimpse into the life of figures like this, especially when it's women who don't often play a super forward role, a named role, a credited role in the story. We get more of Mary and Martha, and that's fun. So as you continue to study this outside of this evening's gathering, focus on that. I'm going to switch the order here, number 4 and number 5, because number 4 is just like so important to me. Number 5, come and see. When Jesus asks them in verse 33 or 32, where have you laid the body? The crowd tells him, come and see. Maybe that sounds familiar to you, and that's because that's how Jesus calls the disciples. Come and see, right? It's not like, you obey me now, like sign, prick your thumb, put a blood print here. It's just like, come and see what this is all about. Come and see who I am. I'm not going to explain it to you. It would defy your comprehending, but just come and see. Walk with me a while. And now here we are, and the crowd tells Jesus to come and see. Of course, the inversion here is that Jesus all along the way is showing them the path to new and fuller life, and the people are saying, come and see this place of death. Come and see the end. You could have been here, you weren't. Come and see what happened as a result. So that's interesting to me. And come and see is in John's first chapter. So now here we are in the same gospel. He's a careful author. He has a good grasp of phrasing and expressions. It feels interesting and intentional to me. All right. The last thing before we move through some of the rest of this, my major sort of interpretive approach is, I believe it's Martha's question. We're going to go back to verse 21. Are you seeing it? No, it's one more. Okay. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out and met him, while Mary stayed at home. And Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. She goes on, even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him. But that first response to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. How often have we or people we love uttered some version of that? Where were you? Why did you allow this to happen? If you had been here, my wife wouldn't have gotten sick. If you had been here, my parents wouldn't have gotten divorced. If you had been here, this bad thing could have been prevented. It's a version of the problem that we've talked about in other classes here and that Christians of good faith have wrestled with for centuries. Why do these bad things happen? And where is Jesus, where is God in the midst of it? Elie Wiesel's Night, if you had to read that going through college, there are Jews in a concentration camp. They're struggling with their faith. One of them cries out, "Where is God?" And one of the fellows in camp points to a dead body hanging next to the building and says, "There he is. Make of that what you will." But we've wrestled with that question for as long as humans have been thinking beyond the ends of their fingertips. Why does God allow bad things? Does God cause these bad things to happen for a purpose? Is it the, for me, dreaded idea, everything happens for a reason? It's all part of God's plan. But that's in the heart of this story. And we'll come back to this. But that's one of the reasons, that line in particular, is one of the reasons I love this story so much. I am cooled down now, but that's about to change because we are now going to move forward into a video screen, and I just am assuming it's not going to work. Okay, I'm hot, I'm angry, that's crazy. Perhaps some of you recognize this. Do you know this? What film is this? This is The Princess Bride, and that is the beloved Billy Crystal. We're just going to get off the screen. That's the beloved Billy Crystal. You might remember this moment. They're bringing the hero of the movie to him. He's been in some sort of torture device that sucks the life out of him. They bring him to the miracle worker, Miracle Max, and they say, "Save our friend, he's dead." And they go, "Well, I can't do anything if he's dead." "Well, he's dead. You're a miracle worker. What can you do?" And Billy Crystal's character, Miracle Max, utters this line that I just love. And I'm going to try to do the voice. It's so bad. Trevor, shut the camera off for a little bit. We'll just go through this part. We'll plug the video in later. But he's sort of poking and prodding on Wesley's chest, the dread pirate Wesley, kind of poking and prodding on. He's listening. He gets, what do you call this, a bellows from the fireplace. He pumps it into his mouth. And the guy that brought him there says, "What are you doing? You told us he's dead." And Billy Crystal says, "Oh, look who's such an expert now. It happens to be that your friend is not dead. He's mostly dead." And then he slowly brings him back to life. That's what we hope for Lazarus. We'll get into this later. But there's some part of us that ignores what we see on the page and clings to this idea that Lazarus, like us, is just mostly dead, not all dead. He could have been revived because then Lazarus is part of it and we're part of it. All hope is not lost. We've hung on to a sliver of our life, our will, our agency, our ability to participate and respond. We're just mostly dead. Am I a sinner? I'm mostly a sinner, right? It's like that. Okay, I think I handled that really well. I showed a lot of emotional maturity. Now, okay, I mean, this is going to be, yep. Oh, there you go, it's done. That's great. This is one of my favorite films of all time. This is one of my favorite stories of all time. This, of course, is A Muppet Christmas Carol, the Muppet version of Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. A Christmas Carol is possibly my favorite piece of literature of all time. It's like, in terms of my religious imagination, it just follows tight on the heels of the Bible. It is such an important piece of work for me. And the Muppet version of it is almost certainly the reason for that. Young Mark Dixon, young Pastor Dixon, as you would have called him, sitting in his parents' basement watching that while the grown-ups lingered at the Christmas table. And in this version, of course, the great Gonzo is Charles Dickens, and Rizzo the Rat is Rizzo the Rat. This is the opening sequence of the movie, and Gonzo as Charles Dickens is about to deliver my favorite opening line in the history of literature. Not "Call Me Ishmael," not "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times," but "Marley was dead to begin with." We all remember that. It's a great line. But a little further down the first page in most versions, there's a tag on the end of that. There's a lot of text in between it, but there's a little pick-me-up at the end that makes that line so powerful for me. Marley was dead go away. Marley was dead to begin with. And if you remember from any version you've seen or read, or if you've gone to the Guthrie, that's the door knocker, right? That transforms in Scrooge's face into the face of his old partner Marley, who's dead. That's the first sort of spooky sign that this night's going to be something different for him. Marley was dead to begin with, first line of the book, a little further down the page. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I am going to relate. This, to me, is what makes the Lazarus story worthwhile. If you don't accept that Lazarus was not mostly dead, but completely dead to begin with, nothing wonderful about this story can penetrate into your heart. Because if Lazarus is just mostly dead, or in some sort of coma brought on by sepsis or other infection, then Jesus is just a startler instead of the Messiah. Jesus was the only one brave enough to open the tomb up and yell loudly. And that's not such a life-giving story. Anyone could have just opened it and blown an air horn, and Lazarus would have popped up and come out as the first mummy in history. That's Halloween. We're still in the Halloween spirit. We're heading towards Christmas. So which do we prefer? Jesus the startler or Jesus the Messiah? Of course, if I give this to you on a multiple choice Scantron, you choose the Messiah because you're all good test takers. But in some corner of our hearts, almost all of us, if we peel it back and examine what's underneath the assumptions, we cling to this idea, well, he just startled him. We want that in some deep, dark part of us. Jesus the startler. Ask it another way. Which of these do we prefer? For me, that image on the right is terrifying. My wife and my oldest son went rock climbing at one of those indoor vertical endeavor. I can't remember which one it was, but this Living the Message episode was brought to you by Vertical Endeavors. Thank you for your sponsorship. That's a terrifying image to me. When I was a child, there was a Sylvester Stallone movie that came out called Cliffhanger. I don't know if anybody remembers that. I never watched it. I watched the first, there's an opening sequence where somebody is hanging by one finger and they cut the rope. I was like, absolutely not. Much scarier to me than a full-blown horror movie with a clown chasing you through the street. It was just a terrible feeling. Which of these do you prefer? If you can see, the one on the left is jumping blindfolded off the cliff into that hand. The other one is hanging on for dear life. I think, oddly, most of us, again, in the recesses somewhere inside, prefer this. This is works righteousness. This is, I've only mostly fallen off the cliff. I have my fingertips up there. And if I work really hard and I commit myself to this mission, I can drag myself back up onto the cliff. That's works righteousness. I'm going to use bad language here, but in the context of the church, it's actually technically not a swear word. I'm only mostly damned. If I work really hard and I start to do these good things that I know I should do according to God's law and the scriptures, I can just dig my fingernails in and I can pull, and here's the key word, myself up. Because we take comfort in that. We're participants. We're collaborators. We are hanging on to that agency that is so important to us, that feels like it is coterminous, that is identical to our selfhood. Our fate, our destiny, our salvation is at least partially in our hands with this image. This is faith. Blindfolded, stumbling about, freewheeling off this cliff into the hand of one who loves you and one who has promised to catch you. That's faith. And that's why, at this point, I'd like someone to volunteer to come stand on the piano, and we're going to do trust falls for the rest of our time here together. Any volunteers? Drew? Should we all catch 6'7" Drew for the next half hour? We have two images, two concepts of Jesus that are hanging in the balance. They're in tension with each other. And this story forces us to reckon with that we often just it's just submerged in our consciousness somewhere. We don't even realize they're in tension with us, and we use them, we pick them up one or the other as the situation might dictate. But they are in fact in tension, they are not compatible. And this is a little bit of a trick question. Do we want a strong Jesus or one who can't even get past a locked door? American Christianity, many large segments of it are captivated by the idea of a strong, powerful Jesus. Religion scholars have coined the term muscular Christianity. It's not a one-to-one. It doesn't actually, this picture's fine. There are a lot of people who'd be fine with it. But muscular Christianity just means like just a powerful, they also talk about a masculine Christianity. It's we really want a strong Jesus. And yet, paradoxically, ironically, the Jesus as it's imagined in that theological system is really impotent, can't do much, is really dependent on you. The most that this Jesus can do is come up to that wall and knock sort of feebly, "Hello, can you let me in? Is anyone there?" And if you don't open your heart to Jesus, I tried, I'm sorry. And he walks away. They are incompatible, and yet this is the trick question of it. There are a lot of Christians in America who want both, who put these two totally incompatible images together. One of the things I love about the Lazarus story, and one of the things I love about our Lutheran theological tradition when it's at its best, is that it does not succumb to this false choice, which is really both and, neither or, at the same time. We have a different conception of Jesus. And where do we get this conception? From the Bible, conveniently enough, which is just great. Who would have thought? This is, I'm not an art historian, but I just realized as I was putting this slideshow together, I sort of coincidentally keep going back to the same artist, not on purpose. This comes from the Brooklyn Museum of Fine Art has posted some things online. Others have come from just around the internet, different places. I'm probably going to pronounce his name wrong. His name is James Tissot. Are there art historians here? I don't know. James Tissot. He's a late 19th century artist, and he just painted these really representative images of scenes from the Bible. Really good, that really sort of capture what actually you would find if you went to read the story. So this is, of course, that moment, Jesus wept. And this is, I think, what Jesus's true strength looks like. There are a lot of articles, and now there's a new book that's making the rounds on media that talk about young men in America today and the crisis that they're facing, and there's the loneliness epidemic. I don't know if you read it, if you're on this side of the newsreels. Crisis of masculinity, male loneliness epidemic, on and on. There's all this stuff. And of course, in response to this, or at the root of this, there's a huge media industry that's targeted at our boys, that is putting forward a certain sort of idea of what masculinity looks like and what strength looks like and all this stuff. And the thing that I am struck by over and over and over whenever I bump into content like this is how brittle that version of strength actually is, how anxious it is, how insistent it is on hiding. It has to hide behind bluster and bluff and a mask. And I think true strength, for example, to use a scenario, when I was a kid, if you wanted to talk to a girl when you were going to a middle school dance, you had to go talk to her by the lockers in the hallway at your middle school. And that meant, as opposed to now, when they just like, which one did I lose? I have two microphones. As opposed to now, they just like DM each other through the video game they're playing, or they text, or they Snapchat, or some digital with the comfort of this screen in between them. I had to walk directly up to my wife and say, would you like to go to dinner with me? And she said, not tonight. That is vulnerability, and it hurt, and it's a little embarrassing, but that's strength, right? And strength is not immediately turn around and say, well, fine, I don't want to go to dinner with you either. That's trying to like cover up the wounded ego. That's not strength at all. That's whatever. Anyways, so we see that happening more and more and more in American Christianity, talking about a strength that's really an anxiety, that's really a fear of vulnerability, that's really an unwillingness to stand on your feet and say something that opens you up to criticism or rejection or in any way makes you vulnerable. Well, here we have Jesus. Jesus could have walked into this scene and the people, Martha says to him, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And he could have responded, hold on, you don't even know what I'm here to do, right? He could have lashed back, recoiling at that sort of criticism or whatever that was, anything that could have hurt him in his heart. Instead, Jesus sits down with them and he weeps. He looks around, he sees the pain on the faces. The Jews are mentioned here in the story. These are the Jews who've come from the city to comfort Martha and Mary. He sees their pain. He sees the pain on the sisters' faces. And he's, another verse in here says, greatly moved and troubled in his spirit. To me, that's strength. People, to come back to this, often ask, how could God do this? How could God allow this? Where were you, God? Why do, I have to get it right because I've switched it so many times in classes. Why do bad things happen to good people? I almost always say, why do good things happen to bad people? Because that's equally illogical and troubling, right? People ask these questions all the time. Where were you, God? If you had been here. If you had been here. This story is medicine for that. And it's medicine especially for, this moment especially, is medicine for the false comfort. The false comfort that comes from everything happens for a reason. I understand why people go to that. There are passages in Scripture that sound like that suggest that it's a clockwork universe. God arranged all the pieces across the centuries, across the millennia, perfectly and precisely, and then at the beginning of all things, wound it and set it off and let it go. And things that look like bumps and bruises and trial and tribulation, that's all part of these gears turning. God set them in motion. This is happening for a reason. And if we just stick here long enough, pretty soon the cuckoo's going to come out of the clock. And you're going to see this was all worth it. I understand the compulsion to do that, and it comes from such a good place. But it's only comforting until it's not, right? And we'll all experience a moment at some point in our life where that message no longer provides comfort. It instead provokes a crisis of faith. The suggestion that everything happens for a reason, well, that's okay. That can be a little bit comforting when the thing that happened is, I didn't get into the college I wanted. Okay, everything happens for a reason. God closes a door, God opens a window. We can roll with that. It works okay when everything happens for a reason is a response to not getting the job you wanted. or having to quit your job or something like that, it doesn't work, or it doesn't work for long, or it starts to go paper thin, or it starts to deteriorate when true pain, the kind that can't be resolved, that can't be moved past, true grief, when that enters your life, which it will. By the way, if you're lucky, it will. Because grief is nothing other than an echo of love. If you have grief, it means you had love. If you have love, you will one day have grief. So if we're lucky, we have grief. But when grief enters and somebody says, oh, I'm so sorry, but of course your mother died. This happened for a reason. This was part of God's plan. Then it doesn't work so much, because some of the implications are, so God killed my mother to teach me patience or independence or something? That doesn't work for me. That's not good enough. Why would God do that? Now you're right back into the crisis, right? This is medicine for that moment. If you're in a hospital room with someone you love, they're looking to you for comfort, and not if you're the primary person, obviously you're the person holding the hand of the primary person, but if they're looking to you for a word of comfort, this story is an alternative to everything happens for a reason. And the alternative is this: Jesus is here too. Jesus did not inflict this or cause this for some grand reason. Jesus is here with you in this bed, in this room, and Jesus weeps. That's not the end, but that's a pretty good place to start. God's heart breaks with you. God, whose son also died. Jesus is here with you. Jesus, who also suffered unto death and prayed that that cup might be taken away, right? As he's going to the cross, he prays, God, if there's another way, let's do it that way. Nevertheless, thy will be done. Prays so fervently that some translations of the Bible say blood drops from his forehead. These people, God, Jesus, they know suffering. That's what they came for, to enter into that with you, to be there for you in that moment, to weep with you, and then to do this next thing. From that strength, from a strength rooted in connection, expressed through vulnerability, through the strong, courageous willingness to take the full brunt of this human experience and not hide from it or reject it or overreact to it, from that strength comes this power. This is why God entered into the human form through the nativity, through Christmas, to be with us in our human experience and have a moment like this. Lazarus, come out. This is like the heart of faith. If this isn't a part of the story, we are in a great, well-oiled social club, which has its advantages. There's something nice about being together. There's something nice about listening to music together. But if this story isn't a part of the faith, if the Easter story isn't a part of the faith, this is just nice. It's just nice to be together. This is the thing that alchemizes the whole thing and turns the lump of metal into brilliant gold. We're close to the end. I'm going to say thank you to the people who are joining us live via satellite. I'm so glad that you can be here with us, and we wish you adieu and good night, and we're jealous of your much shorter commute, but goodbye and thank you. And now we'll open it up in the room to questions here, and we'll go for a few minutes, and we'll actually get you out of here early because it's the Mount Olivet way.